do composition of functions using graphs. So it's not actually different from when you are composing functions using tables. So we follow the same procedure. It's just that in the table, your x values and y values are readily available for you. In the graph, you really need to identify it using how to locate your points in the Cartesian plane. So let's try to solve letter A. So we are trying to find f composition g of -2. Okay, so our first step, remember to always do it backwards when it comes to composition. Our first step is to find g of -2. And g of -2 means that your x is -2. You're trying to find the value of y, which is also your g of x. So x is -2, and what is your y? Okay, so when x is -2, you have to look at the graph where it hits you. Now remember, you are at G, so you have to look at the graph at G. Okay, so at G is here. Okay, don't look at the blue graph because the red graph is G and our function is G. So here, it hits it at 1. So when x is -2, y is +1. So this is 1. Okay, to compose it with f, the x now for f is no longer -2, it will be 1. Okay, so you switch to 1 after. Now we are looking at the f graph and we are supposed to be focusing our attention in the blue graph. So you need to really be detailed about this. So when x is 1, that's the meaning of that. When x is 1, your graph will be hit two ways, in the red graph and in the blue graph. But what you are trying to find is when your x equals 1 in the blue graph. And therefore, this will be -2. Okay? Because when x is 1, y is -2. So the answer here is -2. Okay? So we will do letter B. G of f of 2. Okay, so this means that we need to look for f of 2 first. That is, what is x is 2, y is what number. Okay, so function of 2, meaning you have to pay attention with your blue graphs. So function of 2 in the blue graph is -1. So not in the red graph, it should be in the blue graph. So this is equivalent to -1. This now becomes your x at g. So g of -1. So therefore, focus now your attention with the red graph when x is -1 and your y is 0.5. So this will be equivalent to 0.52. Okay, so letter C says that we need to compose f and g, and the value of x is -4. So first step again, we look for g of -4. So we need to pay attention to the red graph and look for that value of y when x is -4. So there are actually two values that that your graph will be hit, in the blue graph and in the red graph. But because we're looking for g, we need to look for that value of y when x is -4, and it's equivalent to -1. And so after that, it will now become your x at f. Okay, and so that would be equivalent to function of -1 in the blue graph. And then, of course, it will hit it both ways, in the red and the blue, but you will be particular with the blue graph, which is actually at 2. So don't be confused about that. And sometimes I'm also confused of where to look at the graph. So it's particular that it should be at f, so look for f, not for g. It should be here. And the value of y when x is -1 is +2. Okay, so therefore, our value for letter C is equivalent to +2. Now we will go to letter D. So means that G is composed with F and the value of X is 1. So go backwards. So your F1, meaning your X equals 1 at F. So X is 1 is here. Don't look at this value because it's a red graph and we're looking for the F graph, which is the blue graph, is equivalent to -2. Okay? And now this becomes now the new x for g, because g is our outer function. So g is -2 at x. So look at your red graph now. So when x is -2, Okay, it's equivalent to positive 1. It will hit it at blue and red, but of course, it will also hit it at red, so your y here is also equivalent to 1. Okay, so therefore, as a summary, when you're composing functions using graph, you need to go backwards. So first is you look at the function in the outer or in the inner function, and whatever you take as a value of your y in that inner function, it will be the x of your outer function. So you are switching your x from the outer to the inner. So from in this situation, from -1, from -4 to -1. This one from +1 to -2.